imagine a young mother.
She is on trial for her life. She is charged with the murder of her 3 young children.
You say that out loud, that's as horrific as it gets.
More than 12 drugs, Ambien, Valium, Prozac, Zoloft.
She jumped out the window.
Yeah, I haven't seen a motive. Hey there, everybody. We are out of network, literally and figuratively. It's the name of the show, but we're actually outside of our studio, so it's a little bit more of a casual atmosphere for the next couple of episodes. So forgive some of the ambient noise that may be taking place. But we're here, and we are talking about a really important topic that is on full display in a Massachusetts courtroom right now. We're talking about the defense of Lindsay Clancy. She's a 35-year-old mom, and she is on trial for her life. She is charged with the murder of her 3 young children, and her defense is not something we see or hear about very often.
Almost at all. It's not something I ever heard of. I know postpartum depression. I don't know postpartum psychosis. And to be honest with you, I don't even understand postpartum depression that well. And look, I don't want to put everybody in my camp of being ignorant to it, but I think a lot of people, men in particular, we hear it. Unless maybe you see it or see somebody go through it. I don't think there is a good enough understanding of it. But this postpartum psychosis is other level, something that is almost hard to believe.
Yes, and I think you make a couple of really good points. Anyone who's been through a pregnancy, who has been a mom, and a new mom specifically, the fact that you don't know that much about it, I wouldn't be that surprised about. You're a guy. Maybe you wouldn't know about it because you aren't under the threat of experiencing it. But even a mom, even a woman, I don't know that much about it. I look back now to my first pregnancy and think I was suffering from it, but no one talked about it.
Wait, which one? Mental?
Ava, the depression,
illness.
postpartum depression. I was depressed for a year. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed, and that is not me, but there wasn't a name for it, and people don't talk about it because truly, and I still think even with more of a heightened awareness about it, if you're a mom, it is taboo to feel anything other than maternal bliss, to feel anything other than baby love for your baby. And if you feel something different, if you feel something dark, sad, scary, depressing, you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to admit it, because you will be judged and people will think you're not a good mom, you're not a good person, you're not a good human being if you don't fall instantly in love with motherhood. And that is why we don't know a lot about just postpartum depression, let alone postpartum psychosis.
What that is, I'm trying to think of how, was it the Cleveland Clinic, the way they put it? They said this is a mental health emergency.
Yeah.
What this woman went through, and again, the prosecution we can get into says something different. But as far as her defense goes, and the claim she's making is that she was going through a postpartum psychosis, which is very rare, but Rose, when it happens, they say the only option is to call 911 immediately.
Wow.
They say it's a mental health emergency that needs immediate action. That's the first line they have in describing it. And so it's worth paying attention to. And look, I don't know what's going to happen with this lady's trial. Evidence is going to be presented, but this is worth sitting up and paying attention to. And if nothing else, Robes, being aware to a point that you know what to look out for of a family member. I know it's rare, but this is, and even depression, Rose, we need to be aware and looking out for that in folks as well. But this case is as sad as it gets.
Yeah, and this case highlights that it truly is and can be a situation of life or death. Like, the consequences can be fatal, and certainly they prove to be in this case. And I would argue that not only is 35-year-old Lindsay Clancy on trial, but also on trial is the role that this mental health disorder can play in a tragic situation like this, and the role that medical personnel did, or maybe in this way did not help or aid in the way they needed to help this woman. This story is scary because it wasn't as if it happened suddenly, she did nothing about it, she heard voices and she had a mental break. No, this went on for months. It started about 12 weeks into her postpartum. After she gave birth, she started to feel the way she had felt before, and she sought help, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And her defense is claiming that the drugs that she was given to try and help her get through this period of darkness actually contributed to the psychotic break that led to her killing her own children.
And children we're talking about are 3 kids, the youngest 8 months old. So imagine a young mother strangling all those kids with resistance bands. Now, you say that out loud, that's as horrific as it gets, and you want that person to be punished severely and immediately. But then you start listening, Robes, and look, the trial, haven't sat through that trial and don't know. But Robes, when you hear something like this, my first immediate thought is something is wrong with that woman. That is not normal. She has had some kind of a break, and she needs help rather than to be imprisoned. Just generally, you cannot imagine, you don't have, nothing in your maternal instinct would allow something like this.
It's correct. It flies in the face of everything, actually, everyone who knows and loves and still loves Lindsay Clancy has said about her. This is a woman who devoted her life as a nurse. She was a labor and delivery nurse, so she worked in the hospital. She worked with newborns and infants, and children were her life. And to see her wheeled into court on Monday, the first day of what will be a 6 to 8 week trial, she actually cannot walk because following the deaths of her children, she slit her wrists, cut her neck, and jumped from a 3-story balcony, I believe, and she cannot walk. She is in a wheelchair because she did try to end her life after ending her children's life. But the prosecutors are claiming that, yes, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan died by the hands of their own mother in a premeditated, and they called it deliberate extreme atrocity and cruelty. They have given her some pretty hefty labels and claiming that she did this out of pure evil. I mean, that's the insinuation by the prosecution right now.
Well, yeah, they have their evidence they're going to present. It seems difficult, given what we know, that there is no consideration, it sounds like, on the prosecution's part that anything was wrong with this woman, that there was any mental illness of any kind. That's hard to, even just commonsensically, you're not going to look into this a little more to think. The suggestion is that this loving mother, and loving by all accounts, right? That this loving mother, they are saying, is a monster who premeditated, decided to kill her children and strangle them just out of nowhere.
Yeah, I haven't seen a motive as to why, if it was just pure evil and it had nothing to do with a mental illness or a postpartum psychosis, why would a mother go to those extremes? It wasn't as if she and her husband were having a difficult time in their marriage, where they were getting divorced, where there was a custody battle, where there were money or financial issues. None of that has been on the table. So it's interesting. They point to the fact, from what we've heard so far, that she used a GPS app that she was monitoring. She sent her husband out to go pick up takeout food, and that she mapped how long he would be, and it would take him 30 minutes before she went about and executed her plan, according to prosecutors, to one by one choke her children with those exercise resistance bands. That's just hard for anyone to get their heads around. I can't imagine. But you talked about postpartum psychosis being a medical emergency. We looked up what postpartum psychosis is, because this, by the National Institutes of Health, they say this affects 0.1 to 0.2% of new moms. That is how rare it is, and that's why one might assume that it's just little known. People don't know that much about this disease, what causes it, who it affects, and why, but they do know that if it's happened once, you have a really good chance of it happening again and again. And this woman did have a history of depression, at least postpartum depression.
Again, as far as the psychosis, this part goes, again, learning all of this, so it's more likely to happen in your first pregnancy. It usually shows up a couple of days after giving birth, but it can be another 6 weeks before it shows up. And you said, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know, but doctors don't know a whole lot about this. They don't know what exactly causes this. They have a couple of things they throw out there having to do with hormones, sleep deprivation, a link if somebody in your family has had mental illness, so they think there's possibly a genetic link there. But they just do not necessarily know, and they don't know how to. You can monitor someone as far as awareness goes, but then you throw in the drugs that you get. That could be a contributing factor. So it's a bunch of stuff, but they can't necessarily just point to something. If you're this, then there's more likely going to be that. They can have some statistics, and it has to do with the age of the mother. It has to do with even some of the kids. The age of them is more likely if you're a minority. It's more likely if you're in a certain age range. But Rose, we don't know. So it's one of these weird things that anybody could be at risk for this.
And that is certainly scary, and awareness is key, and knowing what to do. And look, as we pointed out, she did seek help 12 weeks after giving birth, and she was given a litany of drugs. Her attorneys have listed more than 12 drugs she was on in a period of a few months. I'm going to list some of them for you because these are well-known drugs that have very powerful effects. We're talking about Ambien, Klonopin, Valium, Prozac, Ativan, Zoloft, and Seroquel. These are antipsychotic. These are anti-anxiety. Some of these help with sleep. Some of these help with depression. But look, anyone who has had any sort of major medical issue. I've had cancer. I know you have actually, you never took any medication for depression though, correct?
Never took any, no.
But it is
It was
shocking.
recommended.
Yes, it is shocking though. It's been my experience how willing doctors are to write different prescriptions and then just leave it up to the patient to follow through, make sure they're not combining any of those drugs with alcohol or not taking the wrong combination of drugs at the wrong time with or without food. I mean, a lot of things. And to think about all those different powerful drugs in one woman's hand who's struggling mentally anyway, tired, has 3 kids under the age of 7 or 8. I mean, that is a lot. Now, granted, she was a nurse. She was a medical professional, but that doesn't mean that she was equipped to be able to handle her own severe mental illness.
You know, that is where, yes, to what you're saying. But Rose, I think it did help. She did. She knew she was in trouble.
Yeah.
She went to get help and ended up here. Now, I don't know, Rose, what doctor, what they're supposed to recognize, but her family certainly thinks that doctors didn't do a good enough job because they have lawsuits against them for the care that she got. But Rose, yes, who knows? And she wasn't equipped. But Rose, I think probably, at least early on, she started getting help, seeking help for a long time.
Yes, and being, the fact that she was a nurse and being in the actual part of the hospital that she was in the labor and delivery unit, obviously, not only had she experienced, she said, postpartum depression before with their first 2 children, but she's talked to women, been with women, counseled women. She's seen this, so she knew she was in trouble, and she knew, and this is true, this condition, as severe as it is and as rare as it is, postpartum psychosis, it is reversible. But it's reversible with time, with medical guidance. You have to have the right people with the right medicine, and you have to have the right amount of monitoring to get through this safely. Yeah. And look, I've only heard of this particular condition used in a legal case one time. And it was about 20 years ago, back in 2001. So actually 25 years ago. Andrea Yates back in Texas. If you go back and look at the details of that trial and that crime, it is eerily similar to what Lindsay Clancy is claiming happened to her. Lindsay Clancy says she heard a voice. She heard a male voice telling her that in order to protect her children, she had to kill them. They were being threatened. That was the best thing for them. That was what was going to keep them safe, for her and for her children to die. And she believed that voice. Andrea Yates reported literally hearing the same thing as she one by one drowned her children from 7 years old to 6 months old, 5 of them in a bathtub. She heard voices.
That was another thing. That was a shocking, that was certainly a headline-making case all around. But Rose, we got to understand a lot. And I think at that time, it wasn't as understandable. I don't think it was as acceptable. I think a lot of people, that case was in Texas.
Yes.
I think a lot of folks looked at that case, no, what are you going to mean you heard voice? Like, they wanted this woman to be punished, but after the trial or during the trial, Rose, some sympathy started coming around. And it's hard to look at a woman who killed 5 kids and have sympathy. But yeah, sometimes, and I know this case at least hasn't been adjudicated, but Rose, it's hard to understand that someone would do this.
Yep.
I don't understand some of the, don't get me wrong, some of the details about the planning. And it seems like she was methodical. It seems like there was logic in some of her planning and
She had
some
a
of the
mission.
moves she made. I don't know how to reconcile that necessarily. I do need a doctor or somebody to explain that to me, but I think they will explain to you just because that was the case, because she was making logical decisions, sending the husband away, had a plan, had time, and that doesn't mean that she still wasn't suffering from a severe mental illness. Rob, she had to be.
It doesn't make any sense otherwise. There's no other motive
Yeah.
that would make any sense. And that's ultimately what Andrea Yates, she was found eventually not guilty by reason of insanity, and the defense was postpartum psychosis. So we have seen this case before, and in Andrea Yates' case, through the trial, her own husband stood by her, and people were baffled by that. Well, guess what? That is exactly what is happening in this case, too. Lindsay Clancy's husband is standing by her. He wrote a letter in her defense, and you mentioned those lawsuits. Those lawsuits give the greatest insight as to what happened to her from the time she gave birth to their youngest child until that unbelievable day where she killed all 3 of her children. We'll let you know what those lawsuits say about what was actually happening to Lindsay Clancy. We're back, and we are talking about Lindsay Clancy, 35 years old, a registered nurse who worked at the labor and delivery for Massachusetts General Hospital. By all accounts, she was a loving, wonderful mother and wife, and here she is now on trial for her life after killing her 3 kids, and she and her defense claim it wasn't her fault. She was suffering from a medical condition known as postpartum psychosis, and her own husband believes it, is defending her, and is standing by her side.
That kind of tells you all you need to know.
Yep.
He was the one who found her after she had jumped out of the window. He was the one who she had sent away, actually, according to prosecutors, to go get takeout and to go to the pharmacy. She essentially sent him on an errand, according to prosecution,
Yeah.
so she could kill the kids. And then she jumped out the window, obviously trying to take her own life, but ends up paralyzed. He finds her outside. So, and the horror he finds inside as well. This guy knows that's not his wife. And Robes, you and I, anybody that follows us a little bit, even a little bit, knows we're big horror movie fans. And I'm not trying to make a crass comparison, but so much we see in cases, and yes, horror movies, but some are based on real cases, about possession.
Yeah.
About some kind of demonic possession, to where people are not like, this is not my loved one right here I'm looking at. And I've thought about that, Robes, in the way that he can look at her and know something took over her. That is not the woman I married. That is not the woman I'm in love with. That is not the woman that gave birth to these kids. That is not the woman who was a wonderful mother. She's not. So why am I going to hold that thing, that entity, in the vessel of my wife responsible for what happened? That thing is responsible. She's not.
But I think that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that being a comparative where literally it's as if someone is possessed and they are not responsible for their actions. Because if you think about it, 4 days after discovering his children strangled by his own wife, he was able to write a letter talking about how much he loved her, what a loving woman she was, recounting the day he asked her to marry him, saying that their marriage was wonderful, and said that it diametrically grew stronger as her condition rapidly worsened. I mean, he witnessed her unravel. He witnessed her go from being this loving mom to someone who was struggling mentally with suicidal ideations and lots of dark thoughts, hearing voices. He witnessed the whole thing. So if he was the one who was by her side in all of those months leading up to this horrific tragedy. And if he doesn't believe she's responsible, actually personally responsible for their deaths, I would take his word for it over any juror of 12 who will be seated, who are being seated right now as we record this.
Then why isn't the prosecutor listening to that, right? And again, they are representing the victims, who are 3 kids. We got to get justice for these kids. I assume that's the way the prosecutor's office is looking at it. I just, I don't know. Rose, maybe they have evidence and they're seeing something we don't, and they will present this later, and we will feel differently. But the husband right now is going to testify on her behalf, we expect, in this trial, but he's also expected to testify on behalf of the defense, in the prosecution in some way. I don't know how that's going to work necessarily, but Robes, he is saying, I don't know how you do that. You forgive the woman that strangled your 3 kids to death. That's
love. That's love and understanding in a way that we can't possibly get our heads around. I can't imagine being in his position, but reading his letter, I would encourage anybody. It's too long to read here, but all you have to do is go on. There's still a GoFundMe page for the family, and he has an entire, it's actually beautiful. He talks about each one of his kids and what made them special and what made them the loves of his life and how much he loved being a father. But in so much of this letter, he describes loving his wife, and he talks about how wonderful of a mother she was, And look, when we hear about these lawsuits, where his anger is focused on, and hers too, is on the medical professionals who let his wife down. According to him, look, she had debilitating anxiety, depression, insomnia. She first sought help in September. Then she started taking prescribed antidepressants. Her symptoms worsened. She said she actually was going to the emergency room for help. She couldn't sleep. She was feeling all of these horrific, feelings. Auditory hallucinations began within a few months. She's taking more drugs. She checked herself into a hospital in December. She checked herself into another hospital in January, literally 2 weeks before the murders, begging for help. She actually went away for 5 days, trying to get her head straight, trying to feel better, trying to be able to be the mom that she had been for her older 2 kids. And so she actually describes that a voice told her when her husband went to go get the food that this was her last chance to take action. And she felt this immediate need to do what the voice was telling her to do. And she believes, her legal team believes, and her husband believes that it was the drugs in combination with this medical condition that caused her to do the unthinkable, and that she is not responsible. So we shall see what a jury decides, what a jury thinks after hearing all of this evidence, but it's got to be gutting. They said they're going to have as many as, I think they want 18 jurors on that jury, because it's going to be so tough. They need 6 alternates. They don't know how people are going to stomach and handle actually listening to what happened to those kids and listening to what she went through leading up to that horrific day in January.
Yeah, there are cameras. At this point, there have been in the courtroom. I think we do anticipate seeing this on camera, and she will. She's in a wheelchair in court. Jury selection now, but I am fascinated, and this one seems like an important trial for the country to see. It's an important trial for mothers to see, for the husbands to see, for prosecutors to see all over the country, Robes, because this means something, and it could change lives, and it could change outcomes down the road if this is on somebody's mind. What was the one? Wasn't it the COVID psychosis thing, right?
Yes.
That was like to be aware of. Again, we could do something on that later, but I wasn't aware that this can happen. So if you're not even aware and you see this odd behavior, you don't know to get help or what's wrong. You need some sleep, take a pill, take this anti-anxiety. You do it like that and not realize, oh, my kids are in danger. We can change outcomes by paying attention to this case. So if nothing else, it's worth it for that reason.
You make a really good point. This is a trial that's more than just a woman's life at stake. This is actually thousands of mothers out there who have yet to experience this disorder and these symptoms and to be aware of it, and for the medical community to understand it better, to be able to treat it more effectively, actually could save lives. So watching this trial, covering this trial, actually is of significant importance in this country for mental health, for women everywhere, for mothers everywhere. We're all paying attention. So we always appreciate you watching, listening. We'll be back. We'll be checking in on this one. This is a big deal. So thank you as always.